You might think that you need a top-of-the-line gaming PC to have a good experience, but that's not always true. In this video, I'll break down what actually matters when choosing your first gaming PC. Stick around to the end of this video, and I'll give you my top picks for the best beginner gaming PCs. What makes the best gaming PC for beginners? So the really important parts of a good gaming PC, of course, is going to be your graphics card, of course, it's going to be your processor, but the things that really make it important and can really put your PC over the top is making sure that you have a motherboard that can handle all of the things that you might need to be using, whether it's got enough USB ports for all of your different peripherals, and whether it's got enough slots for different SSDs, NVMEs, anything like that. A good solid starter CPU would be something like the AMD RX 5600X or something along the lines of, on the Intel side, like an Intel i5 13600KF. As far as graphics cards go, something along the lines of an NVIDIA RTX 4060 or something even a little bit more cost effective like the Intel Arc A750 would be great options for a beginner PC. So beginner friendly PC is important because at the end of the day, PC gaming may not be for everybody. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the system and comfortable with modifying a system and really getting into and understanding the hobby, as well as understanding how a PC is put together. So it's not always about just throwing the best parts in there and spending the most amount of money. Spending something that's cost effective and achieves the purpose that you want and that you need is really important. What are the essential components to look for when buying a beginner gaming PC? So the essential components are kind of comprised of different pieces, right? So first you have your processor or CPU and your graphics card or GPU. So the graphics card and the CPU are both going to be the two most essential parts, because obviously without a graphics card, you won't be able to render the complex textures and all of the different details that the game might need to display. The CPU is important as well, because when your graphics card is handling a lot of tasks, it will offload things onto the CPU, and at the end of the day, the CPU is the brain of the computer. RAM and storage are also very important details here. For storage, you want to go with an SSD over an HDD, just simply because HDDs don't have the storage capacity or the speed to keep up with modern gaming demands. On the RAM side of things, DDR5 is the new shiny toy, but DDR4 is still perfectly accessible for a beginner gaming PC, and in a lot of ways is a little bit better because it doesn't have as many hiccups and issues as the newer generation of DDR5 RAM does. Something like 32 gigs of RAM is something that I would always recommend, because it's going to allow you to access pretty much any game out there on the market and not have any issues with things like memory leaks or RAM bottlenecks. So for cooling, you really have two options. You can go with air cooling, which is going to be a mechanical fan cooler for your processor, and then you also have the option for liquid cooling, which you can do with a closed loop system, which is more complex and enthusiast level, not so much for beginners. And then what we have called AIO coolers are all in one. They're going to self-cycle their own coolant, they're going to handle all of their own maintenance, and all you really need to do is clean out the fans. I definitely recommend using liquid cooling over air cooling because it's more advanced. However, if you prefer air cooling, you can absolutely find some great cooler options for very, very low cost. On the side of power supplies, I always recommend doing your best to find a modular power supply in case you need extra cables or don't need as many cables. You can kind of move those cables around or completely take them out of the power supply. But if you go with a non-modular option, something like a 550 watt to 650 watt power supply is perfect for a beginner PC. When going with gaming PCs, especially at the beginner level, I always recommend for going for a pre-built over a custom build, simply because you may not know everything that you need to know about assembling a PC properly. A lot of people make jokes that PCs are adult Legos, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all of the pieces are correctly and properly assembled, all of the wires are managed appropriately, and all of the fans are installed correctly to have optimal airflow. So going with a pre-built PC can a lot of times be more beneficial for a beginner because you're going to have an expert putting it together and you're always going to know that you have the best quality. How do you customize your gaming PC? So there's a lot of different ways that you can customize a PC, especially a gaming PC, when it comes to the different options. Again, there's so many different parts and components that go into a gaming PC that you can do everything from a full rebuild where you take the motherboard out, put in new hard drives, put in new SSDs, new CPU, RAM, cooler, the whole 9 yards. Or you can go with some simpler options such as new RAM, where it's just pop out the old sticks, pop in the new sticks, and you're ready to go. Things like the graphics card are pretty equally simple, where you just pop out the graphics card, put in the new one and plug it right in, and it's ready to go. However, I do always recommend to be cautious of what you're upgrading, because if you upgrade to too high tier of a graphics card, but you leave the CPU behind, you can run into bottlenecks where the graphics card is working too fast, where the CPU can't keep up, and it can cause lifespan issues, cooling issues, and at some points can even just totally ruin the performance of your PC. So what's a good budget for your first gaming PC? Balancing price and balancing performance is really, really important whenever it comes to a beginner gaming PC. You don't want to overspend for the wrong parts, or you don't want to go too cost effective and ultimately not get the right results that you want that are going to fit your gaming needs. I would say somewhere between $800 to $1,300 would be a great start for a budget gaming PC, and you can build on it from there, really building that PC up to be your dream computer. What are some key considerations when buying your first gaming PC? So the first and most important thing when buying your first gaming PC is to understand and know the games that you want to play. For example, one of the more high quality and resource intensive games out there right now is Call of Duty. A lot of people think that because it's a mainstream title, it's going to be really easy to run, but it's actually incredibly complex with a lot of high detail textures, a lot of fast changing environments, and it needs a pretty beefy processor and graphics card. It's also a very, very large game running over 300 gigabytes of storage, so you're going to need a pretty sizable SSD to run the game. After you've chosen your favorite types of games, whether those be FPS games, RPG games, anything like that, you're going to want to make sure that you keep your PC relevant for years to come. Make sure that your parts are not old and outdated parts where they're going to become irrelevant in a couple of years. Instead, opt for maybe a generation newer on your parts, especially when looking at budget gaming PCs, so that you can add sometimes 3 to 5 years on your PC's lifespan. So here are my top picks for the best gaming PCs for beginners. First, we're going to have your entry-level PC. What I would recommend for an entry-level PC is going to be something in the range of an AMD Ryzen 5 5500 or 5600X. It's a really cost-effective processor that's going to provide plenty of gaming power for a lot of modern titles. To go right along with that, I would recommend something along the lines of an Intel Arc A750, an AMD Radeon RX 7700 XT, or the NVIDIA RTX 4060. This is really just up to you on which brand you prefer for your graphics cards. As far as storage goes, I recommend 1 terabyte Gen 4 NVMe for your storage device. This is going to run your operating system, run all of your favorite games, and really be a good foundation for your PC as you're adding on more storage drives and things of that nature. I also recommend at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, but I would opt for 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM for any gaming PC so that you can meet all of your favorite needs. For a mid-range PC, I recommend something like the Intel i7 14700K along with the NVIDIA RTX 4070 Super. These are 2 top-of-the-line gaming processor and graphics cards respectively, and it's going to provide you plenty of power to play games that are much larger in scale than your average game, such as Arma, pretty much any racing sim, DCS Flight Sim, Microsoft Flight Sim, things like that. Those larger games do tend to be quite a bit more RAM intensive, so 32 gigs of RAM is definitely a must-have, and I would recommend going into the DDR5 level for a mid-range PC. For a top-of-the-line high-end gaming PC, I recommend the brand new NVIDIA RTX 5080 to go along with either an AMD Ryzen 9800X3D. This is going to be top-of-the-line processor, top-of-the-line graphics card, and it's obviously going to carry a price point along with it that screams top-of-the-line. I would recommend anywhere from 32 to 64 gigabytes of RAM and anywhere from 2 to 3 terabytes of storage so that you make sure you have plenty of space for your favorite games and plenty of processor and graphics card power, along with a 360mm AIO liquid cooler or even a custom loop if you're feeling brave enough.